What was I doing? I was going to do something else. Oh, yes, we were going to look at that guy who apparently had that source with the rumour for Doctor Who and Disney. Because someone in the chat wanted me to talk about this, we have this Tachyon Pulse podcast has got a video with an exclusive, apparently talking about how Disney have made an offer to the BBC to buy Doctor Who. So, I don't know, you folks wanted me to watch it.
Disney, apparently, have made a proposal to the BBC.
Oh, I'm familiar with this content creator. No spoilers, please. I don't know who this guy is. I've not watched him, so I don't know. So let's.
Welcome to the Tachyon Pulse podcast.
Our Tachyon Pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.
First of all, I'll tell you where I'm getting this from. This is actually coming from a source that is on the side of the BBC, and they work in sort of the legal side of things, so they have actually got to see the written proposal that Disney have forwarded to the BBC and how they would like to settle.
My uncle who used to work at Nintendo, it does have that energy about it, doesn't it? But we'll see what's said. You know, let's give him a chance.
The deal to carry on with the international rights for the Doctor Who. So, what have they actually asked for? As I told you 6 months ago, they are asking to pick the showrunner. They don't want Russell T Davies, and I actually think Russell T Davies knows this, even though he's not publicly saying it. He was in the Radio Times yesterday basically saying how he thinks there could be a hiatus for Doctor Who, but it never means it would never be cancelled. He was effectively saying, look, if there's a gap, somebody else will come back because it's a good idea. So Doctor Who will always sort of be running. It'll never end. But the way he was writing it, this statement with the Radio Times, to me it sounded like he kind of is leaning towards this is not going to happen with Disney and, you know, I'm out of a job. And remember, he's doing something else.
I mean, it'd be nice if you had the interview up, or if you could show us and pick and choose bits. 1 second. Doctor Who showrunner said there could be a, quote, pause in the show's broadcasting as fans wait for a decision on the next series. The newest installment is shooting up. Speaking to Newsround. Okay, so it wasn't an interview with the Radio Times, it was Radio Times talking about the clip on Newsround. Tell you what, actually, I think I've got that clip somewhere in my docket. So this is the one that fans collectively catastrophized over.
Very quickly, Series 3. Anyone know anything? Series 3?
I don't know.
I'm asking you guys. You should know more than me.
I don't know anything.
I kind of know that the Doctor's reached the status of like Robin Hood. Sometimes there might be a pause, and during that pause, the viewers of Newsround now will grow up a few years and start writing stories, and they'll bring it back. So I have absolute faith that will survive, because I'm living proof of it. And that's what happens to good ideas. No good idea ever does.
So yeah, it's not a good clip if you are wanting an immediate future for Doctor Who. And also, I've seen lots of people, you know, correctly point out that it's kind of bad for Russell to be like, oh, I hope the viewers of Newsround will be the ones to bring it back, when there's that clip from Confidential when he and Phil Collinson and David Tennant are about to leave in 2009, 2010. And he's like, we've created the show, and then in 20 years' time, it'll be brand new people who are watching this who will make it. And then it's Russell T Davies making it again and David Tennant coming back again. So it kind of feels like we're now in this cycle where every 20 years, Russell T Davies is going to come back and say, actually, it's going to be you folks watching who are making it again. But no, it's actually going to be Russell T Davies making it again. It's not a good look.
Start writing stories, and they'll bring it back. So
But I do believe that culturally, Doctor Who is now in the... I agree with the start of the statement. I think the idea that Doctor Who is now akin to like Sherlock Holmes and Robin Hood, where it can have these revivals, it can have these different interpretations and stuff. I think that's absolutely true. In terms of like it being constantly renewed and retold, there's even like a new version of Sherlock Holmes that I saw advertised the other day with David Thewlis, with Sherlock Holmes and his daughter. And you've also got Elementary with Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu. You've had Sherlock, of course, with Stephen Moffat, with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman. The big difference between something like Sherlock Holmes and Doctor Who, though, is that Doctor Who has had a complex but consistent continuity for the past 60 years, whereas with these revivals of Robin Hood and Sherlock Holmes and stuff, they reset it every time. So I kind of get half of what he means. I get what he means spiritually, but yeah, it kind of seems that without Disney having currently made an agreement, there is no immediate future of the show unless something happens.
But it never means it would never be cancelled. He was effectively saying, look, if there's a gap, somebody else will come back because it's a good idea. So Doctor Who will always sort of be running. It'll never end. But the way he was writing it, this statement with the Radio Times, to me it sounded
Notice the question asked to RTD before he says that isn't included. It just cuts to him saying, I think that's looking way too much into this. The implication with the edits that he's been asked the same question as Ncuti and Verada, and it's news round, okay? This isn't the Daily Mail. It's not the Telegraph. It's not the Mirror. You know, and also because it's news round, they don't want all the repetition. They want to engage kids in. I think the explicit implication, the explicit intent is we've asked these both the same question, and this is their answer to it. It's news round. I'm not expecting them to try and be salacious or underhanded with it. It's not that type of news show.
like he kind of is leaning towards this is not going to happen with Disney, and you know, I'm out of a job. And remember, he's doing something else next year, or this year actually. I think he's doing some project for Channel 4 that he's writing, producing, and everything. So I think Russell T Davies has at very least got an inkling. And the video I released yesterday is basically saying that that's what the production crew believe. They don't think they're going to deal with Disney, and they think, you know, that Doctor Who is at very least going to be going on a break. This proposal that I've got here from Disney was a little bit of a surprise, because apparently the plan was to wait until season 2 dropped and then have the meetings. Now I think that is still basically the plan. They will make a decision when season 2 drops. This is Disney making a proposal that will then be discussed a little bit later down the line. But okay, I won't beat around the bush anymore. What is the proposal? So Disney want to pick who the Doctor is. So they want more control over casting. Disney want to pick who the showrunner is. So
I do think there's. I mentioned this earlier when we alluded to this at the beginning of the stream. You've got these two narratives with this particular video that I think are kind of mutually exclusive. The idea that, you know, Doctor Who hasn't done well, it's not a good enough IP, it's not currently appealing enough to audiences and stuff and everything, but simultaneously it's something that Disney still want more control over. It's something that Disney still want to buy and acquire. Maybe he'll elaborate later, but I don't know how you square that particular circle. If the show wasn't doing well enough, if this wasn't something that Disney wanted, then they'd just drop it. They wouldn't want to try and buy it. I don't know. Disney will probably find it better and easier to make their own show about it, right? I know that Disney's basically been buying IPs for like the past 20 years, but surely it would be maybe a lot easier and maybe potentially more lucrative in the short term for them to try out something completely new. I don't know. It feels like I don't know how these two seemingly contradictory narratives are able to exist in this one.
So they want the final decision on that. They do want full access to the back catalogue, and then they want to be able to control what happens with that. And this is on the international side of things. My understanding is there will still be a partnership with the BBC. Bad Wolf will still produce it, but Disney will control basically what happens. They will control the showrunner, they will control the writers, and they will control the bulk of the cast.
But yeah, but that's the thing though. Why would they buy it, but also the BBC still retains some control over it? They already have international distribution, and they already have some say creatively. For example, the big example we've got is for the Church on Ruby Road. The Disney, they were the ones who wanted the reshoots for that scene where the 15th Doctor gets snowman and has that scene with the police officer. That was a Disney reshoot request that you know, the BBC and Bad Wolf went along with. So they already have some manner of control, and surely they would already have a bit of say if they are putting up a substantial amount of the funding. Maybe not complete 100 creative control, but I don't see how this they buy the brand, they buy the IP. How would that affect the dynamic with this one? Like, because now the cracks are starting to show with this source. Like, I'm not even like trying to like tear this guy down. I'm just trying to think of it logically here. Like if the BBC would get a short-term cash boost by selling it to Disney, but they would still have some creative control. I don't get it. I don't get what's being proposed here. This guy's uncle who works at Nintendo has not got a good story for me.
This effectively means that they own Doctor Who, because effectively they decide.
But they still have Bad Wolf do it. If they're not happy with the current state of play, why would they still have the same production company do it? Because it's not just Russell T Davies, it's Jane Tranter, it's, you know, it's Julie Gardner. Phil Collinson is a producer. I don't think, is Phil Collinson officially on the staff at Bad Wolf? I don't think he is, but, you know, if he is, like, why would they want to oust the showrunner and have more creative control, but still give it to Bad Wolf to make? Why would they not just make it either to another production company or take it in-house? I don't get it.
Everything that happens, they decide who the Doctor is. They decide who the showrunner is. They decide the direct. They basically are wresting control away from the BBC. What is my source at the BBC saying the reaction is to this proposal? The BBC are interested. The BBC has a problem at the moment, is that their funding is getting cut more and more. The licence fee does not cover their costs, it hasn't done for a few years, and the government has no appetite really to enforce a licence fee on...
Whenever these names are listed up, I think of Eccleston, Saint Sack, Russell T Davies. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I think I might have deliberately, well, inadvertently given the same rhythm for those names.
Which is public forever. The reality is that the BBC's days are numbered. And they will have to become like a normal network at some point, relying on advertising or subscriptions or something else to survive. Russell T Davies himself has actually talked about this, that the future of the BBC is numbered, and it is talked about in in government, basically, in the UK quite a bit.
I fucking wish that the fate of the BBC was being talked about by the current government. Lisa Nandy, who's the current culture secretary, has been absolutely stone cold silent since taking up the post in July about basically everything, barring two topics: live sports, which is important, but you can do more than one thing at once, and the current Universal theme park in Bedford. And even those numbers have been dubious at best. It seems like a cool thing having a Universal theme park in Bedford. That seems like a cool thing. But saying that, it would create 30,000 staffing jobs, whereas is it Disneyland Paris or Disney in Florida, which employs around 15,000 people and is 10 times the size? How are you going to have twice as many staff for a park that's a tenth of the size? Whatever. But that's all Lisa Nandy has basically talked about for the past 9 to 10 months since the new Labour government got in power. She has not talked at all about the current TV crisis, about the fate of the BBC, or very minimally, hardly at all, considering that she's the culture secretary.
Future.
So I wish that this bit was true, that they were having conversations about it. I yearn for these conversations.
Of Doctor Who is obviously going to be heavily linked to that, but also other beloved shows, like EastEnders and a million crime dramas and things, stuff that the BBC owns. There is an ongoing problem that the BBC actually has at the moment, that it has a lot of IP it now can't produce because it's unwilling or unable to pay the full production cost.
Now, this is true in terms of the actual production of the show itself, but we had, there was the BBC audit a while ago, where it talked about what the most profitable things for the BBC were, and Doctor Who was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, by a massive margin. Content studio and global media and streaming, because in terms of viewership, no, Doctor Who is not the king of the crop, but in terms of the actual licensing agreements and the money that it makes for BBC Studios, Doctor Who and Bluey are the big ones for the BBC. So why would, even if it wasn't getting the amount of viewership that the BBC would want, why would they give that up to Disney? Because with the BBC, you've got these two different, not conflicting, but separate divisions within it. You've got BBC Studios, which is the commercial arm, which basically licenses everything. It's Big Finish will pay BBC Studios a certain amount for the license to make the audio dramas. Character Options will pay BBC Studios for the license to make those action figures. Doctor Who Magazine will pay BBC Studios. Or, I forget, what's the deal with Doctor Magazine? Do BBC Studios fund the magazine? Or do Panini fund... I'm not sure what the set, but I hope you get what I mean. Doctor Who is a massive cash cow for BBC Studios, even if the actual studio itself, BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, is struggling financially, if that makes sense. So if they sold it to Disney, they would be cutting off one of the two massive arms of its commercial sector. And I don't think that makes sense.
So there are actually...
Even if Doctor Who was getting 5 viewers, not 5 million, 5 viewers, but still making the same amount for BBC Studios financially in terms of licensing and commercial sales, it would probably still keep on trying to make it. Here we go. The BBC Studios' most profitable programs by intellectual property. Doctor Who, and also BBC Group IP. which is the ones that they make in-house. Third-party IP is scripted drama series, game show format, and live. These formats are making less or comparable money, whole genres, compared to just Doctor Who on its own. That is absolutely bonkers to think about.
Several productions here in the UK at the moment that have been greenlit by the BBC, but have never gone into production because the production partner that the BBC are working with, their BBC basically saying, look, we can put up about a third of the costs. You need to go away and find somebody to pay the other 2/3. The BBC have been doing this for a while with really big productions that they've done and partnering with American streaming providers. So in Britain, we see that show here, but on abroad, it's shown on whatever network. Disney know this. The conspiracy.
This is actually 100% true, what this guy has said. Essentially, because the BBC, and also other, it's not just the BBC, it's ITV, it's Channel 4, it's Channel 5, because the UK economy is in such a shambolic mess at the moment, and the UK consumer spending power is so little compared to how it was a few years ago, that literally to make media, you need these co-productions. You need to have money from international sources like Netflix, like Amazon, like Disney, like other production companies and stuff, or funding from other international orgs. Like, one second, that Red Eye drama for ITV, where was that partially funded? Bad Wolf, Sony Pictures Television. Yeah, so that was a co-production with Bad Wolf and Sony. Sony Pictures Television is the American branch of that. So it was British and American money that made Red Eye. You could not make a show like Red Eye with just the UK funding because we're too poor of a country. So when you've got these co-productions, they were like a big part of TV media being made in the UK a couple of years ago. But over the past few years, that number has gone down year on year on year to the point where now co-productions in the UK for TV are down about 70% from where they were in 2022. Which is a massive, massive hit. And because we're so poor as a country, you've got all these broadcasters who are wanting to make these dramas, who are wanting to make these programs, but they literally can't afford to do it. Where you've got a show like Mr. Bates versus the Post Office made by ITV, and that gets seen by about 15 million people in the UK. Massive, massive viewership. However, because consumer spending in the UK is so bad, as in people in the UK literally can't afford to buy stuff, for the most part, where they have to choose between eating or putting the heating on, where they're so poor that advertising revenue is basically useless now. I was watching Reacher on Amazon the other day, and it's absolutely mad that you pay for a streaming service and you have to watch adverts. But anyway, and all of the adverts that played on Reacher were for gambling companies. There's a stat I just remembered. I'll have to find it on Twitter, but like if you watch like ITV or Channel 4, all of the adverts you see are for gambling companies or supermarkets. The vast majority of them are those things. If you want to know the state of an economy, look at what shops are opening up, look at what shops are closing, look at what's being advertised. If you go on a high street, you'll see charity shops everywhere. You'll see like cash for gold, you'll see, or gold for cash, or second-hand shops as well, popping up everywhere, because that's the UK economy right now, because we're so poor. Premier League 2024-2025 shirt sponsors breakdown. Someone had the pie graph online of what this was like 10 years ago. 55% now is gambling companies, then 15% is finance, 10% airline, 5% technology, 5% hospitality, 5% sponsorless, and 5% musician. You just have to look at stuff like this when it comes to looking at the state of a company. Like, for example, I won't be the only person who will notice this as well. As a YouTuber in the UK, obviously I've not made as many videos as I would at this like point in the year, but my advertising revenue is way down on YouTube. And because most of the UK is so poor, they don't really have much in the way of spending power. They buy essentials. And that's kind of the be-all and end-all for a lot of people's budgets. Advertising revenue is not worth as much, so I've not made as much through advertising revenue on YouTube. That's why something like Mr. Bates versus the Post Office can be seen on an advertiser network by 15 million people and still lose money. Anyway, that's the ramble.
Eerie side to me does wonder whether a lot of what's happened in the last couple of years might have been on purpose. Because Disney might have been looking at this and going, actually, Doctor Who is a beloved franchise, and it's quite cheap to make. This is quite a profitable thing for us if we do it right. It's not been done right for a few years, but you look at Tennant, Matt Smith, Capaldi to a degree, it was quite a low budget, but it was popular pretty much around the world. So it's a sci-fi show that doesn't cost a fortune to make, and Disney aren't stupid. You
Without knowing actual budget numbers, it's kind of hard to say. I don't know. Yeah, this seems like a big. I'm not going to say like a bad faith leap, but we don't know how much Doctor Who really costs to make in relation to other dramas, except it probably cost a bit more.
know Mickey Mouse is
Especially considering, like, compare it to, say, you know, Ludwig on the BBC, for example, which has different stories every week, but a regular recurring cast, regular recurring sets that they come to and film on location. But whereas Doctor Who, that's basically a film every week with a different cast, with a different setting, with different directors and different people involved. So it's a bit hard to compare.
in the corner going, "Let's get the TARDIS. Let's bring K9 back. Come here, Paul." I was asked to do my Mickey Mouse impression again. So whoever put that comment on, ask him to do it again.
Didn't Disney pump 100 million into Doctor Who? I don't think. Do we have the exact number? I heard it was more like 50 million, but yeah, I don't know how much.
It's your fault I did it. That is where we're at the moment.
Hi Phil, just joining. Who's this guy you're watching? This guy who claims to have a source with the BBC's legal department that apparently Disney are wanting to buy Doctor Who, but I don't really see much going on here. Chat wanted me to watch it. What dramas nowadays are expensive in the Doctor Who? Maybe something like Line of Duty might be comparable, but even then, yeah, probably Doctor Who is probably one of the most expensive. I'm trying to think of what it could, unless you've got like massive Hollywood stars involved. I don't know.
Disney aren't stupid, but they don't want to spend the money that they did on the last 2 seasons. They don't want to spend that sort of money again. They do want to regain control, and do or die, they want it to be on their terms. Doctor Who is a very beloved franchise, but they want the back catalogue as well. I just wonder, and again, the conspiracy theory in me thinks they could have
At least he's not spreading hate speech, as if the bar is that low for fandom Doctor Who discourse. Holy shit.
actually set this up, allowed the show to go the way it has done, knowing there would be a reaction, a negative reaction, and knowing the BBC can't really afford to do this on their own, so that they
Wait, so
could
what was
then
that bit? Sorry.
go the way it has done, knowing there would be a reaction, but they want the back catalogue as well. I just wonder, and again, the conspiracy theory in me thinks they could have actually set this up, allowed the show to go the way it has done, knowing there would be a reaction, a negative reaction, and knowing the BBC can't really afford to do this on their own, so that
Yeah, that's a bit dumb, I think. That I know he acknowledges that it's a conspiracy of his and a bit outlandish by nature, but yeah, I think that's pretty silly. The idea that, oh, we'll upset loads of people with these 2 seasons of Doctor Who that we're going to put funding in and do a massive, like, big promotional push for in America, including Good Morning America appearances, get the blue carpet out, do some premieres and stuff like that. So, but make it deliberately bad or make it deliberately provocative and to upset, because here's the thing, I've been in these fandom spaces long enough and talking about reactionary fandoms long enough to know that no matter what Russell T Davies did, people would have been upset. Like, if they had cast the straight white cis male Doctor, they would have just made up shit to get upset about. We've seen this stuff on like Nerdrotic, we've seen this stuff on Dave Cullen and Bolstrek and stuff, where if they can't actually find anything tangible to get upset about, they literally just make it up. Like, we've seen this happen in real time. They will just invent reasons to get angry. They will just lie about the objective cause and effect events that happen on the episode itself just to get mad at it, because they know that their audience are not discerning enough to fact check them, and that their audience also don't really care. So I don't believe that. Like, I think that's a bit silly.
that they could then, at this point, just before season 2 drops, drop this proposal on them that basically would wrestle control.
I know I've not seen Bolstrek's new review. I've not watched his last. I've not watched his season 1 reviews either. I was kind of saving those for when I did my own reviews. But yeah, I've heard that it's like predictably bad and very racist.
From the BBC to Disney. On a smaller scale, this is kind of how Disney does business. Over the years, they've been kind of known as a company that are quite happy to do sort of very aggressive takeovers of companies and things like this. This feels like an aggressive takeover. And
It does feel like it. Like, if this rumor is true, like I even mentioned this earlier, this does feel like a takeover of like they did for Marvel, Star Wars, Muppets, Pixar, etc. But I don't see how that's connected to the conspiracy of making it bad so that you can take it out. I don't get it. That's a very strange leap that I can't figure out.
and that Mickey Mouse, come here, Pluto, is coming in and doing a hostile takeover, basically, of the Doctor Who franchise. It would not surprise me if they actually at some point went further and actually proposed to buy the IP directly from BBC.
So, yes, I thought you had a source saying that that was the case, that this was happening. Ooh, what? Ooh, I caught you out there, Mr. Pulse, if that is your real name.
Maybe then agreeing international rights stay with Disney, but the British rights come back to the BBC as a part of a partnership. I'm being told that's not quite what
But isn't that what the current arrangement is in terms of distribution? I don't know, I'm tired.
the deal is now, but effectively it goes almost that far. Disney are basically doing everything to take control of the show without actually having to give the BBC, say, 500 million quid for the IP. It's a hostile takeover on the cheap, you could argue.
On the cheap if they have 10 to 15 year plans for the series, but it's bad economics if they want international distribution of a show that they don't have to foot the full bill for. Because, for example, if they did, I think the figure that gets thrown around is that Disney paid 50 million per season to prop up the... Or was it for the 2 seasons? I can't remember. Either way, 50 million, shall we say, for additional resources and funding for Doctor Who under Bad Wolf and Russell T Davies and everyone. Like, compared to like the cost of, say, Andor, compared to the costs of something that they have to make from scratch, like Rivals or something, that's like chump change. That's like basically nothing at all. And all they have to do is put it on their streaming service outside of the UK and promote it in America. And that's basically all that they sort of need to do, with the exception of, there are the additional expenses of, say, accessibility features on Disney Plus, like, audio description, language, like different languages and stuff like that. But they kind of do that as a default anyway, because they're a worldwide streaming service. So maybe it's a cheap hostile takeover if they want to keep making stuff for 20 or 30 years. But in terms of just saying, here's another company internationally that's going to make a series for us and we only have to put in a couple of million. Yeah, I don't know.
Will the BBC go for it? As I say, they are interested because they can't afford to do it on their own. It's almost like, well, at least this way it'll get done and we can make some money off it. On the other hand, Doctor Who has been a very profitable franchise for the BBC for a very long time. And this deal basically means that they lose that. But it hasn't been profitable for the last 5-6 years, or definitely not to the degree at least.
That's categorically not true. We have the BBC audits, because like BBC Studios is a public company. It's a commercial arm of the BBC, and we know we get the reports every year where it's like, what were the biggest things that BBC Studios made money on this year? And it's always like Doctor Who, Top Gear, Strictly, and Bluey, and basically, I don't know what, maybe, I can't recall maybe the last year or the year before, but like, there was a good 5 or 6 year period when it was under Chris Chibnall, Doctor Who was under Chris Chibnall as Jodie Whittaker, where year on year on year, BBC Studios was making more and more money. And a lot of that was because of Doctor Who. So I don't know if he's mistaking the idea of the viewing figures compared to the commercial licensing and the corporate dealings from BBC Studios. I don't know. And if he had a friend who worked in legal at the BBC, I feel like he'd know what this distinction is.
Maybe it's time for BBC to cut its losses. There are a couple of things that I want you to sort of comment on. Do you trust Disney to actually do something with
I'm confused what the intention in making this video is. Viewers, I think. I don't buy this.
Doctor Who that we
Like,
would...
if I were to hear the news story tomorrow, Disney Plus is considering buying Doctor Who, I think that this guy would have just been incredibly lucky at predicting the future. He hasn't actually heard anything. I don't agree. I don't think this is true.
I mean, Disney are actively trying to get away from their woke sort of label. I know that I speak to a few people that work in and around Disney on the sort of PR side, and they are desperately trying to do that. A couple of the movies we've seen recently will be the last of those films that went into production 2-3 years ago, when sort of DEI and the woke agenda was very at the forefront of Mickey Mouse's mind, and now it's sort of like...
But the thing about the DEI and woke agenda is just making media. We've got to a point of like fandom nadir of like just anything is woke, anything is DEI. and it doesn't matter what the actual content and the actual material of the media in question is. Like, I would argue that Russ T Davis's last season of Doctor Who was probably the most apolitical the show has been for a long time, like with very little like actual like big political commentary. It's definitely compared to Russ T Davis era 1. 1000%. It's like night and day difference. But it's been levied with these accusations of DEI because it has a black actor, because it has non-white actors involved. And that's just kind of it. That's the beginning and the end of the criticisms, apart from maybe, oh, the Space Babies, they mentioned something about abortion briefly in one line. Maybe Dot and Bubble is kind of like the only exception, but the fact that Dot and Bubble is sort of like the only one compared to the countless episodes that have been broadcast is like, okay, whatever. I don't know. I guess disagree. I don't know if this is like him revealing the agenda at the end of the video. I don't know the guy. I've not watched his videos before. If I have spotted this, then surely the marketing and the creatives at the head of the biggest media company on the face of the planet also know this. Like, I don't know. There might be a difference between like the public facing like angle at Disney and the internal memos and documents that get thrown around, but if I've noticed that fandom commentary is just completely shallow enough and basically deals in hate fiction basically, then surely Disney have as well.
We really need to get away from this, so I think we would see a very different Doctor Who.
Could you see the BBC selling the distribution and production rights but keeping merch once, or at least a percentage of earnings from the merch? No, because like I've mentioned before, with the exception of Bluey, Doctor Who really is the BBC Studios' only big money maker at the moment. Like, you've got massive shows like The Traitors, for example, which have like a big audience, but in terms of actually licensing that and getting the merch and the commercial appeal of that, it's very limited by its format. Like, it's a reality TV show. You could maybe make money on selling a board game of it. You could maybe make money with a podcast of it, and maybe a little bit of merch and stuff, and a little bit of licensing. I don't know. You could sell the soundtrack on Spotify. I don't know. But with Doctor Who, you can have action figures, you can have audio dramas, you can have comics, you can have magazines, you can have this massive plethora of like creativity and merchandising potential, which is what makes Doctor Who such a big thing for the BBC, that they'd be stupid to give up any percentage of that. Everything I don't like is woke unless it's successful. In that case, is anti-woke. Oh yeah, we saw this with Super Mario last year. We saw this with Godzilla -1 as well.
But Disney really do have a mixed match of successes and failures. They do some things brilliantly. They do.
How much money is made by the current era of Doctor Who, not counting the back catalogue? Probably a lot, because that's where all the new stuff comes in. And like, if Doctor Who went off the airwaves for a couple of years, it would still probably make a lot of money from for the BBC like commercial arm. But if you have it in frequent production, that reinvigorates interest. I don't know. I'm getting tired. My ADHD medication's running out that I took this morning. So but I don't know what the split is of it, but I'm inclined to believe that most of the money is made by, it could be a good split, because you have the steelbooks of the classic series, you have the collection box sets of the classic series, which do well, but also you do have current Big Finish, you've got current DVD and Blu-ray sales, you've got current streaming and stuff. I don't know. It's an interesting question to ask. I just don't really know what the answer is, and it would be pure guesswork on my part.
Do other things terribly.
Do you think if it paused, it could come back? I think it's more likely that Doctor Who would come back now than it would have been more likely in 1989, for example. So because it has got the established track record of coming back. It's still not guaranteed though. But like I said, that's less to do with Doctor Who as a pop culture like piece of iconography, and more to do with the UK being an exceptionally poor country.
I think they would do Doctor Who. Also, if you were the BBC, would you do this deal? I think I would, but what would you do? Get into the comments and tell me.
But if you think that you would, I don't think you're very smart. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know this guy, but I just think that if for some reason, if it was up to me, I don't think it would be a smart deal. I want to do a full video about what the potential future of Doctor Who could be. Because, like I said, I actually have heard like rumblings and sources and stuff, and some interesting rumblings in regards to the BBC and Disney. Because I don't have an uncle who works at Nintendo, but I do work in the TV and film industry proper. And I've not worked in scripted for a while. The most in terms of scripted that I've worked on has been commercials and stuff. I've not worked on TV dramas since 2021, 2022 maybe. Most of my stuff has been sort of in entertainment, but so I've heard stuff, but I want to maybe do an actual video on it as opposed to a live stream thing. So yeah, I'm more inclined to think that BBC would want to migrate existing episodes from Max to Disney Plus, since Disney has deeper pockets than WBD. It's true, but as we've noticed from the past week, there's been a few economic events which have hampered stonks, shall we say. We go from mid-March up till Trump's Liberation Day, in massive quotes, and then about 20% of their value is wiped off the stonk market. Then there's this recovery when it gets reneged, and now we're back down again. Bad timing for Docky Who when the co-producer loses 20% of the market because a man doesn't know how business works and happens to be president. There was that moment in one of his meetings, televised things with Trump at the moment. China are announcing that they're going to have fewer films, American films show in China. And Trump was like, well, I can think of worse things. And then you've got companies like Netflix and Amazon and Disney like sweating because so much of their money is made from the Chinese market. So these media companies are going to take a massive hit. What's depressing, though, is that even if financially it makes zero sense, ideologically it seems like the big broadcasters and media makers in America have spiritually trying to get behind Trump's plan, which is stupid business, because for Netflix you wouldn't have a show like Squid Games without co-producers internationally. You wouldn't have shows like Adolescence without that. You wouldn't have a show like Rivals without that. You wouldn't have Bridgerton for Netflix as well. It's stupid. It doesn't make financial sense. It's just fealty to a broken ideology. Is Doctor Who popular in China? You know what? I actually don't know. I believe the plan under Chibnall was to expand to China in 2020. Then there was a worldwide pandemic, and then that didn't happen. The TARDIS has landed at the Tao Maker Festival in China, and it will stay until September 2018. Like they had a push to China in 2018, and my understanding is that there were deals to push it more in China for post Series 12. But then a worldwide pandemic happened, which kind of scuppered the plan. We could have been living in the better timeline, I guess. Having a co-producer in China would be way more stable than having a co-producer in America right now.